Hi, I'm Gina Southgate. I'm a painter. I paint live at gigs regularly, and that's probably what I'm most known for. I make installations and real-time sculpture in performance with improvising musicians, and I work a lot on the free improv scene and on the jazz scene. I was born in Whitechapel, but I grew up in Essex where my family lived. Because my siblings were older, I spent a lot of time on my own as a child because they'd already left the house. So I had a lot of time to kill, so I used to read whatever was available and learnt to amuse myself. I never really imagined that I would become an artist, and I think that aspirations in those days were for a girl like me to work in a bank or become a secretary. But there was a school trip down to Southend Tech College where there was an art department to look around the art department, and I went there on the trip. And everyone was having such fun. I thought, wow, this looks really great. I really want to do that. And I kind of thought, yeah, let's quickly work and get my O-level in art and apply and go there. The reasoning of me going there and seeing it would look like such a great time is it's what the whole world tells you is the wrong decision to make about why you choose your career path. You shouldn't be choosing your career path because it looks like it's a great time. And that, I think, is a really unfortunate thing in society. People now are being asked to make their choices like when they're about 12, when they choose what O and A levels they do. They're meant to really have narrowed things down. Their projects are about following other artists and talking about what other artists have achieved in art, for example. They're not projects where they're allowed to feel their creativity and talk about themselves in any way. It's all about what other people have done and how you can follow those things rather than what you want to do and how you can forge your own path. The people that I met there were really, really life-changing, and they're people that I see to this day. For example, Alison Moyet was a student there. Steve Linnard, who is a fashion designer, was a student there at the time. And Dave Garn from Depeche Mode. They're just three of the people that have actually gone on to do amazing things, but everyone I knew has gone on to do amazing things in their own way. I think for all of us that are still in touch, it stays a really special time for us, and we're now 60 and at the time we were 17, so it's kind of, intense and great. So when I was on foundation, I did do quite a lot of screen printing and all things, but my key area, the area I felt confident in, was 3 dimensions. So I liked making ceramics, I liked working in wood, I made some jewellery and metalwork. As I say, I did love screen printing, but when it came to painting and drawing, it was a mystery to me. And the way that people taught in those days was the tutors weren't really there, and they weren't really hands-on in things like painting. Because it's fine art, it's very superior and nefarious, and it was untangible to me. When it came to me just having a free hand, I had no confidence and no knowledge, and nothing had equipped me to do that stuff. And so I kind of felt that I would probably do better if I applied for a 3-dimensional design degree, which is what I did. I applied to Middlesex and Brighton to do wood. There was a course then, a degree in wood, metal and ceramics, and I didn't get into those places. And Camberwell offered me a place on the pool choice to do silversmithing, and as that was part of my 3 things, wood, metal and ceramics, I kind of thought, okay, it's not exactly what I wanted to do, but it meant at 17 I could leave home, move to London on a full grant, do a degree in something that was like, I didn't know what it was going to be like, and it was a no-brainer. So I took the place at Camberwell, and it was actually after my really exciting foundation years. It was actually like really dull. There was a lot of bearded men with flared jeans, even though this was post-punk. They used to drink tea out of tin mugs and talk about, I don't know, metalwork. it was like so slow and laborious. So you'd get a disc of metal and you'd have to heat anneal it make it glow red so that it softened it. Then you'd have to sit at a stake with a hammer for days on end, just going round and round in circles until this thing raised up to be in a bowl, and that was called raising. And that was like one of the processes. To a 17-year-old punkette, that was just like, it was like the kiss of death. What I do now in terms of painting live at gigs is a complete backlash to that. And when I make a real-time sculpture in a performance, which might last for 20 minutes, it's like it's everything, it's the antithesis of everything I did at Camberwell. It's like it took me the whole of my second year to make a teapot, and that was fabulous, but it was like so slow. I think the whole punk era changed everybody that lived through it and experienced it. And for me, it wasn't so much like punk, like the Sex Pistols or the Ramones or whatever, but it was like the offshoots of that, like people like the Slits, which were women that were just outrageous. They were behaving outrageously for that era and the clothes they wore. I mean, they used to cover themselves in mud, and they weren't necessarily the best musicians, but they used to do the wildest things, and they really influenced us. They used to call me at Southend, they used to call me Miss Country Casuals, because I always matched. I used to wear like little yellow ankle socks, and then I'd put like a yellow bow in my hair, so I wasn't ever really gonna get into like ripped and dirty clothing, although I did have my hair shaved and I had like crimped bits at the top, and and so I was a fashion punk, really, I would say, rather than as opposed to like a real punk. But we still really adored and admired that ethos and those people that kind of set that way for us. I think that my boredom with the work wasn't necessarily to do with punk, but there was a punk ideal in making. So what happened as well, me being around the music and the music scene, was that in those days, digitally, nothing had happened yet. So if people wanted to produce a piece of artwork to accompany a gig or an exhibition, or make a homemade CD, well, it wasn't CD, records and then tapes in those days, they needed someone to produce the artwork, and most of that was like the hand-done thing, which was the whole punk ethos of, there was Jamie Reed's posters where he cut up all the letters out of the newspaper and made the Sex Pistols imagery and posters, and it was a do-it-yourself time, and it was a do-it-yourself mentality. So what would happen is a lot of people on the music scene would say to me, or the improvised music scene would say to me, oh, well, you're an artist, do us a poster, or do us a backdrop, or do us a flyer, or this, that, or the other. So I started to do sort of graphic-y things that were just very handmade. And what you had to do was you had to literally go to the library and get photocopies, and to get colour photocopies cost an absolute fortune. They cost at least £1 each in those days, which was really a lot of money if you wanted to do, say you was giving out 50 flyers and you had to do 25 of them and then cut them in half. So often it would be cheaper just to actually produce them yourself as original pieces of artwork. So I got involved in doing things in that way. My first year at Camberwell, I went out with Tim Roth, the actor, who was a sculpture student. He was on foundation, he was a year younger than me. So that was really exciting to get in a relationship with Tim Roth. But what he did, he helped me spend my whole term's grant, and then went off with a whole group of really cool, uber cool people from the student union. So that's a whole nother story. But in my heartbroken moments after that relationship ended, I went to a party. My friend took me to a 21st birthday party where I met a man that was older than me, 15 years older than me, in fact. And he was into improvised music and cricket, and he was an architect, and he lived in Camden, and he had a really groovy bunch of older friends that were like in their 30s. So I had this dual life going on. I had my life going on at Camberwell with all my student mates that were my age, and then I had ended up being a 6-year relationship with this bloke that was a lifelong friend to this day. But that introduced me to the music scene. So that's kind of how I ended up as a young... So all my mates, no one would come to any of the jazz gigs. It was like, what, you know, it was really, again, another area for old blokes with beards nodding like this. And I kind of didn't know why I was there, but I met loads of great people on that scene, older than me, and then I met a few people that were similar age to me. And that was around the time I started to go to Giles's things, jazz dance things as well in Camden. And what happened was eventually I split up with this guy, and then I realised that I really missed going to gigs. The gigs that I thought I hated, but I really missed going to them. So I started going to them, and that's when I started to draw at gigs. I went off travelling in '88, and when I came back, I'd been trying to have success as a metal worker up to then, and I'd had quite a few exhibitions, and some of my exhibitions had been abroad, and I'd had pages about me in the Crafts Council magazine, Crafts, but I felt like the way to go with that was you really had to get a Crafts Council setting up grant to get a workshop and get all the equipment. I just felt too young and carefree and footloose to be tied down at 25 with a workshop and making slow stuff that never makes you any money, because that's the other thing, it's so laborious that you can't really earn out of it. When I came back from travelling, I went to the Jazz Cafe, which was a small cafe in Newington Green, Stoke Newington. I just went there to a gig, it was a new venture. My now friend John Dabner had nothing on his walls, and I just said to him, I'd really like to have an exhibition here. John Dabner and his wife came round to my little studio space on a Sunday morning, and I'd framed up one of my pictures very beautifully in the picture framers. And he said, well, is that all you've got? And I said, well, at the moment, but you know, there will be more. And so he just said, okay, go for it. So I think 6 weeks later or 8 weeks later, I filled the whole place with paintings. I made this fantastic machine. There was a conservatory with a glass roof, and I made it from a bicycle wheel and all this kind of forms, and I got my friend to put a motor on it. So it was this slow moving machine that had mirrors involved, and so it reflected light all around the conservatory. I sold work. I put on a really brilliant gig on the opening night. Painted t-shirts with Jazz Cafe written on, of which I've still got some. And I just thought, wow, this is fantastic. It's the way that I'm going to go. It's what I want to do now. And so that was in 1988. So we're now in 2022. So that's kind of 34 years ago. My stuff is mostly, all my exhibition stuff is mostly grassroots. I have sort of shown bits of stuff with the art world, the kind of art world, but not much. I work a lot on the music scene, so it's kind of, I'm a bit of a loose cannon, so I kind of tend to organise everything myself, really, and I like to follow what interests me. So I could have probably made loads more money if I'd have just followed the money, but the money, you have to have the money, but it's never been my kind of main criteria for what I do. When I first started drawing and painting at gigs, I didn't put the figures in because, as I say, working two-dimensionally as an art student used to just completely floor me. So I did do all my life drawing and all my this and all my that, but I had no faith in what I was doing and my ability. But so when I first started drawing and painting at gigs, I just used to draw the instruments, and it was kind of like as if all these instruments were just playing themselves, and they were forms. I was interested in the form of the instrument. I mean, they're the things of beauty that I first became attracted to. As the years progress, I start to have more confidence, and then someone's arms got to come in when they're playing the double bass, or the hands have got to come in when they're playing the saxophone, or everyone works their own instrument differently. There's one guy that's got a really long straight neck. You can just see it because that's how he plays his bass. People play saxophones, some of them play them up there, some of them play them down there. Drummers sit on a seat right up there over their drums, or they sit really low behind their drums. Everyone has got their own nuances, and as the years have progressed and I've painted often the same people again and again and again and again, I become really familiar with how they relate to their instrument. If it's someone that interests me visually, I'm really interested in like how their feet are, the movement in their feet, the movement in their hands, with how long their fingers are, whether they're using the bow, where their pressure points are, so how they react as they play, how they're working as they play, and if I can capture some of that in a few brush marks, which people often say to me, oh, I can't believe it, that's only like, you've only made 3 lines there, but that's definitely so and so and so and so, and they can see exactly who it is immediately from how I've represented that person. So there's that, and then sometimes I get invited to work with musicians, so rather than making paintings of them, I will interact with them and we will do a gig together. My brushes, all of the things I use in my painting equipment all make sound. I'm not a musician and I wouldn't even dream of saying that I'm a musician in any way, but I have been to enough improvised music to know when it is right to make sound, when it is not right to make sound. I actually taught sound making at Westminster University to music students. So, you know, these are sort of other skills that I've picked up on the way that I use whenever is appropriate. When my kids were little, I was teaching, working in the picture framers, being a mum to 2, had my own practice, exhibiting. At that time, when my first son was born, I'd just been on 2 Arts Council improvised music touring schemes, so I'd toured around the country, one when I was pregnant, and then the second time when he was about 6 months in a little carry cot. And it was like great, and we got money for those tours, but it was a bit like, I can't do everything, something's got to go. And that was in a way the least tangible. It was like my mum would say to me, what are you doing? Why are you up that ladder scratching that bit of plastic, you know, da 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 da. And then I'm a mother myself, and it's like, well, maybe this is not actually the thing that needs to stay here, but really, it's always run through everything I've done, and yeah, and now people ask me to do it, and that's really fantastic as well. So